On her Maker Queen website, Steph Piper describes herself as a creative technologist, passionate about maker culture, hardware development, and edutech. Earlier this year, Steph started her Skill Trees project, an online repository of skill trees that can be used for upskilling yourself and as an exercise in sharing and upskilling among a group, such as members of a makerspace. Now she's publishing her work as a Make book, Skill Seeker Maker Edition. Let me read the opening paragraph from her introduction. There's a certain magic in learning a new skill and making something from scratch. Trying new things is a challenging and rewarding habit to build, making us more capable along the way. What if every skill we learn could be visualized on a video game dashboard with a path to future goals revealed? This book aims to do just that, with a collection of video game-inspired skill trees that lay out a set of milestones for a range of skill areas. Welcome to Makecast. I'm Dale Doherty, and I'm joined today by Steph Piper, and we're going to be talking about, among other things, Maker skill trees, an effort to really build an open source guide, if you will, to how and what we learn as makers. So first of all, welcome, Steph. Nice to talk to you today.
Thanks so much, Dale. What a pleasure.
Tell me where you are right now, because it's pretty far away from where I am.
I'm based in Australia, in Queensland, and my town that I live in is called Toowoomba. It's about an hour and a half from Brisbane, and it's a lovely little regional spot. We're called the Garden City.
I've never been to Australia, and I've always hoped that we'd see a maker fair. We've seen some smaller ones, I think in Sydney maybe, but I've always understood it to be a culture that embraces DIY and ingenuity and making. So tell us about yourself as a maker.
So my day job is running a library makerspace at the University of Southern Queensland, and I really love my job out there. I get to work with the students a bit more one-on-one because we're a smaller uni, and it's always an absolute delight to see the students learning those skills and putting them into practice. I also have a side hustle outside of work called Maker Queen, where I make electronics kits aimed at young kids. And what's special about my electronics kits is I was able to find a factory that does two different solder mask colors on them. So they look a little bit like enameled pins when you see them for the first time. And I recently also crowdfunded a wearable technology project as well called Glow Stitch LEDs. These are LEDs that you can sew with a sewing machine. At my core of making, I'm really into finding ways to make learning a lot easier and more fun.
So tell me, how did your library get started with a makerspace?
I actually studied at my university that I work at. When it first began, I'd actually moved down to Brisbane and I was president down at the big Brisbane Hackerspace. And at the time, it was the biggest one in Australia. We had stuff there for all the usual stuff, plus metalworking and woodworking and welding and blacksmithing. And I was president there for 2 years. I got a little email from my old uni one day that said, "Hey, can you help us set up a makerspace?" And I said, "Of course." And so I drove down the road, hour and a half, and sat the lady down and essentially told her how to do her job in running the space. And then she sent me the job ad. She was setting it up for someone else. So that's how I ended up getting the role. But yeah, I really loved my time at Brisbane Hackerspace, though. It really cut my teeth in that space. And one of my favorite things about that space was that we had a 24-hour swipe card access system. And you could actually set your own theme song to play when you swiped in through the door, which would play on every Cisco phone in every room. So you soon got to know what everyone's theme songs were. It was such a fun space.
So a library makerspace is interpreting some of the things that you'd find in, say, Brisbane Makerspace and adapting that for kids and adults, but often you don't have the number of pieces of equipment or tools in there. And it's a little bit more focused on activities and small projects and things. Is that how your space works?
Yeah, so because it's a library space, what's great about it is that it's open to all staff and all students. So you don't just have to be an engineering student or an art student to access the space. And my focus is really on the upskilling side of things and making sure that people feel really confident and independent on the tools when they come in to use them. So I don't particularly want to be holding everyone's hand all the time. I really want to be able to get them in and give them the knowledge and tools to just sit down and put on a 3D print themselves ask me a question if they need to, but that's the kind of independence I really want to see, where
Yeah.
you want to really give the students those hands-on skills.
It's sometimes called self-directed learning, just really getting them through some basic safety training and operation, but let them figure out how to do things rather than being
Yeah,
told how to do things, right? The
yeah.
more conventional way. And before we leave the library makerspace, you must see this every day, but I always feel like we are still trying to convince a lot of people of the value of this, of hands-on learning, of engagement. And when kids start really getting engaged and they begin to direct what they're learning and what they want to do, it really opens doors for them.
Yeah, so true. It is delightful to see those students coming in and picking up those skills. And I think there's always sometimes come to me and say, oh, like getting the students to do all this themselves, isn't there a risk of them breaking the machines and all this kind of stuff? But that's how you learn. And that's how you get an even richer learning experience, is by something going wrong and you learning how to fix it. So often now
Absolutely.
I come back in the space and a student has already fixed a machine before I've needed to touch it, or taught someone else how to use something, which gives them an even richer and deeper understanding.
Yeah. It's also the genesis of community too, right? When they feel like that machine is something they can fix or get to use it on their own, it gives them a different set of permissions, I think, in the space than if only an expert is able to do that.
That's right. Yeah, it gives them a sense of ownership and direction in the space as well, which is what you want to see. Like all of those kind of spaces really need to be organic and community driven around what the needs and wants of the people that use it are. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love to see it.
Whereas I feel like the maker stuff is really, we're going to learn how to do something or a mechanism or a machine, but really it's to open it up so that you get to do something based on your ideas, something that you're driving, and you'll end up in a different place than another person.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I think the most powerful learning experiences are when you have a project that you're personally deeply passionate or excited about.
Right.
And when you
Exactly.
actually get the chance to make that come to life, it's fantastic.
That's the basic idea of what we are calling making today, is
Yeah,
to realize that idea, to take it somewhere from just being in your head, to bring it out, develop it, and make it something that you could talk about with other people, if not
yeah,
show.
that's
And
totally right.
tell me, in Australian schools, do they have some of this in the schools, or is this a
Yeah,
mix?
definitely. Like in the
They
private
do.
schools, they're pretty
Well,
prolific. They give them all kinds of names as well, like innovation spaces,
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. But yeah, not as prolific as you would want. I still come across quite a lot of teachers who have gotten grant money to put together a makerspace, but they've only been able to get one 3D printer and it's sat in the corner with some kind of a clog or a problem and no one knows how to fix it. And often my advice to those schools is that they really need to hire someone or find someone to really champion that space and actually
yeah.
not make the teachers do the hard slog of keeping things running.
I think that's right. It seems we've learned that people tend to spend money on equipment and not people.
Yeah.
And people really get the students engaged. You need the equipment, but sometimes getting the equipment in advance of having staff to really develop programs for it is usually, and the equipment gathers dust and people are bored by it.
Yeah, it needs to go hand in hand for sure.
So let's talk about the real thing I wanted to learn more about, was the maker skills trees. And how did this project get started, and what's been your role in pushing it forward?
I've been working on a huge repository of printable skill tree templates that you can print out on just an A4 sheet of paper, and you can use it as like a kind of a video game inspired pathway to learning a new skill. How you use it is it looks at a whole array of tessellated hexagons, and you start at the bottom and you just color in any of the tiles that you've already done. So they might say stuff, for example, on the 3D printing tree, like put on a 3D print for the first time, make a 3D model, all that kind of stuff with a bit more detail. And as you progress up the tree, it gets into the more advanced realm. But it's a really great way to easily visualize what your skill progress is, spot any skill gaps that you might have, because obviously you just don't know what you don't know, and get inspired to maybe try some new things. It really helps me personally. I've been really surprised to sit back and be like, oh, actually, I am stuck in a little bit of a rut with some of my learning there. I've gotten caught in my same old cycle and way of doing things, and I'm not trying new things, which is so easy for us to do. The way that this project started was, yeah, it was inspired through my work in the Makerspace at work, where I see so many students come through the space and they're excited about it. But because it's not a compulsory activity, it's an extracurricular one, often a lot of students miss out on those opportunities. And they miss out on a lot of the other great stuff that the library in general runs around how to reference properly and how to use the library services. And they sometimes graduate without even knowing how to check out a book or some of those core skills. I really wanted to find interesting ways to gamify and incentivize people to upskill. And this was
And
what I came up with.
your hexagons, they cluster in tiers of sorts, but there's not a linear path through them or a sequential path. That's a key insight that you've captured there.
A lot of people expect a skill tree to look like a tree, but I think in reality, the way that we learn and do things is quite out of sequence sometimes. It doesn't particularly need to be in sequence. Like we can be jumping to advanced stuff after only doing a few basic things. And that's a pretty normal way of doing things.
Yeah.
When you think about how you go about becoming good at something or becoming advanced at something, it really is just about breaking up little tiny tasks into little chunks. And that's exactly what this is.
There's a way that your trees look a bit like a map, that's
Mm.
giving some kind of guidance in how one might do that, especially with a lot of stuff online today. It's easy at the beginner level to sometimes get in, but I think you get stuck after a while. You got that one or two things that satisfied your curiosity, like how to 3D print, but there's a bunch more beyond where you are. That's what you're mapping out for people.
For sure. Once you really start to get into it, there's quite a lot of different roadblocks that you can come across. People often gatekeep the knowledge behind learning more advanced technical skills. Some of that stuff is paywalled. And if you don't know what you're searching for and you don't know the words to describe it or what the technical lingo is, like all you really need is just a little hint, which is what
Yeah.
those tiles provide for you to
Yeah,
go and run.
it's actually the corresponding task is to use one of the titles in the skill tree and then search for it, or increasingly ask AI about it.
That's the whole idea. If you were to try and make individual books about all of these trees, it would just be huge. It would be too much, but this is just enough of a pathway that you can get a bit of a peek ahead and
Mhm.
use your own kind of self-propelled learning to go and search and find out. And I really intend for this to also be a social experience where you might print one of these out and go and ask a friend who's an expert and point at a tile and be like, what's that about? Suddenly you've learned something new and they might have taught you what it's all about.
There's also value in putting a name on something. We can agree that's what it is.
Yeah. Like you just
You
don't
may
know what you
know how
don't
to
know.
do something, but you don't know what to call it or how to
Yeah.
classify it.
Honestly, it's been a delight speaking to so many experts as well to make these trees. I feel like I've just learnt so much from all these different people every time. And every time I'm sitting there Googling stuff, being like, whoa, that's a thing, or that's a word that describes that. I'm always, yeah, pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. How many skill trees are there?
So far in the repository, there are just over 50.
50.
Which has been crazy to make. My eyes have been slowly turning hexagonal doing this, but
Like
yeah,
a beehive.
it's been delightful to see so many guest contributors see the project and think, yeah, I'd love to contribute. So
So
we've
that's
had,
I wanted you to talk about that a bit.
yeah,
So this is a system that can be expanded upon, that is an open source project that you can contribute to, improve upon. Tell us about that.
anyone can jump on the GitHub page and there's instructions for going ahead and designing your own. Obviously, it's also intended that you can remix and work with the base tree and customize it to your own goals. So you can go and edit them if you want for yourself. But yeah, it's been great to see so many guest contributors make all kinds of weird and wonderful niche trees that have been submitted. So I've had someone submit a roller derby skill tree, which is now up on the repository. I've had a lot of French translations sent through, which has been delightful. I recently had a Kubernetes tree sent through, which is a tree that I'm going to have to Google every single tile uh, to try and work out what little icons to put
Right.
next to each one. Yeah, all kinds of great stuff.
How do you see, say, a teacher using skill trees or even a librarian?
The way that I personally use it with my students in the Makerspace at work is I have a tree that's just called Makerspace. And it just is a collection of a whole range of different skills from 3D printing across to electronics and everything in between, like using a hot glue gun and those kinds of soft hand tooling skills.
Hmm.
On the back of this sheet, there's actually prize tiers. So if you reach 20 tiles, then there's a bookmark prize. If you reach 40, there's a book prize. And if you reach 60, out of 73 tiles total, there is a Bluetooth headphones prize, which is worth about $150. Yeah, it really is incentivizing you to get to that next level if you can. We also have it as a bit of a scavenger hunt as well for up in the library. So during
Right.
O week, you can pick up a smaller one that is just library kind of skills like checking out a book and using the self checkout and all that kind of stuff. And if you can complete 15 tiles on there, there's a book prize or a study pack waiting for you as well.
Interesting. This might just be my mind, but how do you keep kids from just coloring in tiles?
Yeah, obviously you got to treat everyone like adults. I do put on the questioning hat sometimes and you go, oh, tell me about this project you did. And they'll tell you about it. And then, yeah, I'm generally pleasantly surprised. I haven't had anyone try and cheat the system yet. I don't know, like it is very much intended to be self-directed learning as well.
There's some role of an educator or other person to have you talk about what you did, just because it's not really an exercise in collecting tokens as much as it is gaining skills and
Yeah.
opening that up to you. What can you do now that you have those skills? I think you're taking a really big step because people will say, I know 3D printing. Another person say, I know 3D printing, but that level of knowledge may be very different.
Oh,
And
yeah, that's so
and
true.
and I think that's a bit where on the skill tree you could say, here's a group of students. Everyone in the class knows these three things. Some people have done the next three things and others are even beyond that. So it does give you some ways, not so much to rank, but to compare maybe because that person is a little bit more advanced, they can talk a bit about those skills that they learned and what they were able to do with them and persuade you that they're worth acquiring as well.
For sure. There's definitely a spectrum of, I think, confidence levels.
Yeah.
Until you sit down and do a skill tree to work out where you sit in your actual skill, the way that you perceive your skill can definitely be huge. You've got people
Yeah.
with imposter syndrome, maybe,
Yeah.
who really underestimate. I've had experiences as well, meeting people who like really overestimate their skill level for what they've done. One day I had a student come in while I was fixing a 3D printer. He told me how to fix it incorrectly. So he was trying to like tell me how to do it. And I said, oh, so do you have a 3D printer at home? He said, no. I'm like, have you used a 3D printer at all? And he's, no. And as he was walking out the door, he said, as a mechanical engineer, I have an intuitive understanding of how this
Oh,
works. And
really? I have an
hilarious.
institutional arrogance. It's funny. Have you seen them being used at the college level at all?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people send me through pictures of them being used, which has been delightful. I had a picture come through where a whole office had done a skill tree to rank everyone's
Nice.
skills, and it was like an internal competition between Makerspace managers, which is pretty fun. A lot of people send them to me on social media as well as like finished snapshots. My favorite one that I've seen is someone did the electronic skill tree and had everything colored in except for the let the magic smoke out tile, which I thought was very impressive. I'm still really trying to get the word out there about it.
So when did you start the project? How long has it
Uh,
taken to develop it till today?
yeah, I've been working on it since April last year.
Well, that's pretty quick. You've gotten to 50 skill trees and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been working pretty hard at it. I'm really trying to get to 40 out of 60 skill trees out of the goal skill trees that I wish to make, leading up to potentially releasing a book about it. And I've got two ideas for a book. I'd really love to make a specific book, say if you
Mhm.
join up to a makerspace for the first time. And then I've also got my eyes set on making a big book, which has 60 different trees in it. It allows you to go and calculate stuff like your life XP score, where every tile that you can color in is 1 point.
That's interesting. One of the things that always fascinated me about people in a makerspace is you'll have people that are expert in one area, but not in another, right? And
Mm,
sometimes the creativity comes from bridging that area that you know a lot and connecting to something else and learning as a beginner over there. I think it's also good for you to see yourself as a beginner. Apparently, that mechanical engineer probably has lost that idea of himself as a beginner learner. But so makerspaces have a broad area of subjects, if you will, or fields, and people sometimes stay comfortably in one or two. But I think by being around other people, they can branch out and find and learn new things.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that people use the book in that kind of way where you can really socially level up together.
Yeah,
I've even
yeah,
got like a leaderboard page where you can write your friends' names down and where they're currently sitting if you want to inspire a little bit of competition. There's a lot of
yeah.
tiles in the book, nearly one in each tree that is teach a friend. So I really want to incentivize people to get out
Yeah.
there and share their skills.
That tends to be the best way that you learn something if you try to turn around and teach something. Let me just go back to your personal work. Tell us about the party button, how you came up with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that was a bit of fun. I had a friend of mine drop off about 5 old walking men traffic lights one day, which I assume were obtained legally. I saw those and knew that was something that a cool project could come out of. At the time, I excitedly removed all of the old green LEDs and I put in those rainbow color cycling LEDs for a bit of fun. I just went and bought one of those actual traffic light buttons for $100 from AliExpress. Got that in, and I made a really janky looking prototype that was Arduino and SparkFun wave trigger, where you would press the button and it would just play just Darude Sandstorm or something for a bit of fun, and the light would come on. And with that early prototype, I was able to submit a grant application to Curiosity Festival in Brisbane, and they loved it. And they called me up and said, "Would you like to build two?" I was expecting only to build one, if at all. And yeah, I was delighted and I said yes. It was probably one of the most challenging projects that I've done. And I ended up having to hire a metalworker to make the full stainless steel chassis that it's made out of. It stands about 2.2 meters tall. It was on display anyway. You press the button and it plays one of 20 randomized party tracks. And the characters at the top do a little dance. They're like little crosswalk characters. Probably the biggest drama of the project was at the very last minute, where we hired an engineering firm to certify that it's safe to be on display in public. Of course, something as tall as the party button can be easily like potentially pushed over or
Yeah,
climbed upon. We weren't allowed to bolt it down either when it was on display, which was a bit of a shame. And so the engineers came back a week before it was meant to go on display and said, yeah, you're going to need to put 350 kilos in the base of this thing, which gave me an absolute heart attack. And we were sitting there brainstorming all of these really ridiculous ideas for trying to get that much weight in there. Like we were thinking about what if we could go down to the defense makerspace and borrow some spent uranium weights from helicopters? Or what if we could find an absurd amount of tungsten cubes, or like really whack ideas? Or if we could buy a bulk amount of fishing sinkers or something. Anyway, lucky for me, my metalworker came through and he actually did the maths and was able to cut about 60 flat plate steel weights that all stack up in the base at the last kind of minute, a few days before it was installed. So,
that's great.
oh, it was stressful.
It's a fun project. I see it a lot at Maker Faire where it's just how can you create an interaction with something where a person comes up and does something and the thing does something unexpectedly or something fun and they enjoy that. And I saw from your videos that happens quite a bit.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to really get people to get a sense of fun from it and
Yeah,
get an idea that when you do electronics projects, they don't have to be as practical as you
right,
want them to be sometimes. They can just be for a bit
right.
of fun.
This is where I think making just allows for this kind of creative expression and to just be playful. There's a lot of makers that first brought something to Maker Faire and then they've kind of taken it around the world because people want to see it. And it's not really a functional thing in the sense that it solves a problem or anything like that, but it's just fun. People enjoy that. And those always give me special joy to see those at Maker Faire.
Yeah, I was delighted to come and visit the big San Francisco
Yeah,
Bay Area Maker
yeah,
Faire,
right.
I
Did
think
you?
just
Good.
before COVID. And I think I probably met you in person, maybe at a distance
Oh, good.
at that
Good.
one.
I'm glad you came. Thank you, Steph, for talking to me today. And I appreciate you sharing with us about maker skill trees.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a delight.